Admiral Marcus Wells stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's first interstellar vessel capable of reaching nearby star systems. The ship represented humanity's crowning achievement, a fusion-powered behemoth with revolutionary gravitic propulsion. What should have been a historic milestone of peaceful exploration had turned into a desperate military endeavor. 3 months ago, Earth's deep space observatories had detected the approaching alien fleet. "Contact in 5 minutes, Admiral," Lieutenant Emma Davis reported from the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white against the console. Wells nodded grimly. Humanity had barely established colonies on Mars and Europa. When the signal came, a transmission in an alien language that Earth's best linguists had partially decoded, the message was clear enough: surrender or die. The United Nations of Earth had a different response. In just 90 days, humanity had converted its nascent space fleet from exploration vessels to warships. The Defiant led a squadron of 12 ships, pitiful compared to the hundreds detected in the alien armada, but armed with weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. "All hands to battle stations," Wells ordered. "Activate the Helios array." This was humanity's trump card, an experimental energy weapon developed from fusion technology. Theory suggested it could disable ships without destroying them, but it had never been deployed against alien technology. The enemy fleet appeared on the view screen, sleek, biomechanical vessels resembling massive insects. They were known as the Vex, and according to their transmission, they had conquered 17 species across 3 galactic arms. "They're launching fighters," Davis announced. "Hundreds of them." Wells took a deep breath. "Defensive Formation Alpha. Deploy countermeasures. And prepare to engage." The human vessels formed a tight defensive sphere, their point defense systems activating as the first wave of alien fighters approached. What happened next shocked even the most optimistic human tacticians. The Vex fighters were fast, but their attack patterns were predictable, almost formulaic. Human pilots, with their unpredictable maneuvers and adaptive tactics, began picking them off with surprising efficiency. "Sir, we're actually holding our own," Captain James Rivera reported from the Fighter Command Center. Wells leaned forward. "The Vex fight like they've never encountered resistance. They're using textbook formations with no adaptation." Chief Science Officer Dr. Lydia Morgan joined him at the tactical display. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their communication patterns. They operate on a highly centralized command structure. Their fighters show almost no individual initiative." This realization spread through the human fleet. While the Vex had superior numbers and technology, they fought like automatons. Human pilots began exploiting this weakness, using erratic maneuvers and feints that confused the alien formations. When the first Vex destroyer moved into range of the Defiant, Wells gave the order: "Activate the Helios array." The massive weapon charged, drawing enormous power from the ship's fusion reactor. A blinding beam of coherent energy lanced out, striking the Vex vessel. Its shields flickered and failed, and the ship drifted powerless. "It worked," Morgan exclaimed. "Their systems are completely offline." The battle turned rapidly. The human fleet, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, was outfighting the aliens at every turn. When the Vex flagship finally retreated, taking the remnants of their battered fleet with them, the bridge of the Defiant erupted in cheers. Later, as Wells reviewed the battle data, Morgan approached with a disturbing theory. "Admiral, I know why they weren't prepared for us. The Vex have conquered species that evolved along similar technological and social lines. Humanity is an anomaly. We advanced from stone tools to space travel in a fraction of the time it took other species." Wells understood the implication immediately. "We're unpredictable because our entire history is compressed." "Exactly," Morgan replied. "And now they know exactly what they're dealing with." Wells stared at the retreating signatures of the Vex fleet. This wasn't a victory. It was merely the opening skirmish of a war humanity didn't ask for, but would now have to fight. 2 weeks after the initial engagement, the Vex returned with a fleet 3 times larger than before. The Earth Defense Council had used the brief respite to consolidate their forces and develop new strategies. "They've adapted their approach," General Laura Rodriguez observed as the tactical display showed the new Vex formation. "They're no longer using the same predictable patterns." Admiral Wells nodded grimly. "They're learning, but so are we." The human fleet had doubled in size. with hastily converted civilian vessels now bearing weaponry. More importantly, Earth's factories had worked around the clock to produce a new generation of fighters equipped with reverse-engineered Vex technology, salvaged from the disabled vessels. When the battle commenced, the Vex displayed new tactics, more flexible formations, and coordinated attacks. Yet despite their adaptations, they remained fundamentally rigid in their approach, bound by hierarchical command structures that couldn't match the improvisational nature of human combat. "The Vex don't understand delegation," Major Tom Fisher explained during the officer briefing. "Their command structure requires approval for tactical changes. Our pilots can make split-second decisions on the battlefield." This insight proved crucial. Human commanders began deliberately creating chaotic battle conditions that forced the Vex to constantly seek instructions from their chain of command, creating fatal delays in their response times. The human fleet suffered losses, grievous ones, but they inflicted disproportionate damage on the Vex. By the time the alien fleet retreated again, humanity had captured 3 intact Vex vessels and discovered something remarkable. "They're not a single species," Dr. Morgan reported, displaying images from inside the captured ships. "The Vex are a collective of at least 4 different alien races, each with specialized roles. Their society appears highly stratified and caste-based. This explained much about their rigid tactical doctrine. Each component species of the Vex had evolved to fulfill specific functions within their military. They couldn't comprehend the human approach where a fighter pilot might also be an engineer, or where a ship's cook might grab a weapon and join the defense of a boarding action. The most important discovery came from the Vex communication systems. Earth's linguists and cryptographers had finally cracked their language completely, giving humanity access to the Vex tactical network. "They're calling us the Adaptives," Morgan translated. "They believe we're a dangerous anomaly that threatens the stability of their expansion. Their leadership has designated Earth as a priority target. Extinction-level response." Admiral Wells processed this information grimly. "How long until they return?" "Based on their communications, they're gathering a fleet from across their territory. We have perhaps a month." Wells turned to his staff. "Then we have 1 month to prepare a surprise for them." What followed was the most extraordinary mobilization in human history. Every factory on Earth, Mars, and Europa shifted to military production. Virtual reality simulators trained millions of civilians in basic combat skills. Scientists worked feverishly to develop new applications for the captured Vex technology. Most critically, humanity began dispersing. Colony ships packed with civilians launched toward distant star systems, carrying the seeds of human civilization beyond the reach of the coming armada. "We won't just survive this," Wells told the assembled leaders of Earth. "We're going to show the Vex why they should have left us alone. They started this war, but we're going to finish it." As the Vex gathered their forces for what they believed would be the final battle against humanity, they remained unaware that humans had already infiltrated their communication network and were preparing a response unlike anything they had encountered in 17 previous conquests. The Vex Armada arrived in Sol System with overwhelming force, over 500 capital ships and thousands of support vessels. Their approach was methodical as they established a blockade around Earth's orbital defenses. What they didn't expect was that humanity had evacuated most of its population from Earth. When the Vex launched their first planetary bombardment, they struck largely empty cities. Emergency shelters deep underground protected the remaining population, while automated defense systems returned fire. "They took the bait," Admiral Wells confirmed from his command post on Ceres, the largest asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. "Commence Operation Trojan Horse." Throughout the asteroid belt, what appeared to be mining operations suddenly came alive. Hundreds of asteroids, hollowed out and fitted with propulsion systems, began moving toward the Earth engagement zone. Inside these massive rocks, human warships waited. Commander Alex Foster led the first wave from inside a hollowed-out asteroid designated Hammer 1. His crew had lived in cramped conditions for weeks, waiting for this moment. "Approaching optimal range," his navigator reported. "Vex fleet remains focused on Earth defenses." Foster nodded. "All units, execute maneuver Prometheus." Across the asteroid belt, the massive rocks suddenly split open, revealing human warships equipped with advanced weaponry. They emerged like wasps from a nest, taking the distracted Vex fleet from behind. Simultaneously, the supposedly disabled orbital platforms around Earth suddenly reactivated, catching the Vex in a devastating crossfire. Human ships, using stealth, technology reverse-engineered from captured Vex vessels, decloaked within the enemy formation. They're in complete disarray, Foster observed, as the Vex communication channels erupted with panicked orders and countermands. Their command structure can't cope with simultaneous attacks from multiple directions. The Vex attempted to reorganize, but the human assault had been specifically designed to target their command and control systems. Without clear directives, the various specialist ships of the Vex Armada began operating independently, exactly what the humans had hoped for. Most devastating was humanity's newest weapon, a virus uploaded into the Vex communication network that subtly altered tactical orders. Some Vex ships received conflicting commands, while others were directed into vulnerable positions. "Sir, the virus has compromised approximately 60% of their fleet," reported Lieutenant Kai Tanaka, head of the Cyber Warfare Division. "Their coordination is breaking down completely." As the battle raged, a team of human scientists and military personnel executed the most audacious part of the plan. Using captured Vex transportation technology, they teleported directly onto the Vex flagship. Dr. Morgan led the boarding team, accompanied by a squad of Special Forces operatives. "Remember," she reminded them as they materialized inside the alien vessel, "our objective is the central command node. We need to extract their navigation data intact." The team fought through surprisingly light resistance. The Vex, it seemed, had never anticipated an enemy boarding their command vessel. Most of their internal security was designed to maintain order among their own hierarchical species, not to repel human infiltrators. When they reached the command center, they found the highest caste of the Vex, tall, spindly beings with multiple eyes and bony crests. These leaders appeared physically incapable of violence, dependent entirely on their warrior caste for protection. "They've evolved into specialized roles to the point of vulnerability," Morgan observed as they secured the command center. "Their society is efficient but inflexible." The human team quickly downloaded the Vex navigational database, the coordinates of every world in their empire, their supply lines, and most importantly, their homeworld. As the battle turned decisively in humanity's favor, Admiral Wells delivered a message directly to the Vex leadership, now isolated from their retreating fleet. "You came to our home uninvited. You threatened our existence without provocation. Now you understand what humanity does when cornered. We are not like the other species you've conquered. We don't surrender. We adapt. We fight. And we win." The response from the Vex High Command was immediate, a request for cessation of hostilities and dialogue. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Vex were proposing peace. 3 days after the battle, representatives of the Vex Collective met with human diplomats aboard a neutral station hastily constructed in Earth orbit. The aliens arrived in an unarmed vessel, their demeanor noticeably subdued. Ambassador Robert Kendrick led the human delegation. A seasoned diplomat, he had spent the intervening days studying the Vex social structure and communication patterns. "We welcome you to neutral ground," Kendrick began formally. "We are prepared to discuss terms." The Vex chief emissary, a tall being with iridescent scales and 6 eyes arranged in a crescent pattern, responded through a translation device. "The collective acknowledges the unexpected capabilities of your species. We propose cessation of conflict and recognition of territorial boundaries." Kendrick smiled thinly. "Let's be clear. You invaded our system with the intent to subjugate or exterminate us. Now you propose peace only because you've discovered we're not as easy to conquer." As you expected, the Vex delegates conferred among themselves with clicks and whistles before the emissary responded. "The collective has existed for 12,000 years. In that time, we have incorporated 17 species into our empire. None have resisted as effectively as humans." "Incorporated?" Kendrick's tone hardened. "You mean conquered and enslaved. We bring order to chaos," the emissary replied. "Each species serves according to its abilities. This is the natural way." Admiral Wells, standing beside Kendrick, stepped forward. We've studied your empire's structure. Your natural way is built on rigid hierarchy and specialization. Each conquered species becomes a new caste in your system, fulfilling roles you assign them. The emissary's skin flushed a deeper blue. What the humans had learned was a sign of discomfort. This is efficiency. It has built the greatest civilization in the known galaxy. Dr. Morgan joined the conversation. Until you met humans. We don't specialize like you do. Our strength comes from our adaptability, our individuality. Your system can't accommodate that. The negotiations continued for hours, with the Vex clearly uncomfortable with human diplomatic methods. They had expected formal protocols and rigid hierarchies, not the free-flowing discussion where junior members of the human delegation spoke directly to the Vex leadership. We have a proposal, Kendrick finally announced. Humanity will not pursue further military action against the Vex Collective under 3 conditions. First, you will recognize Earth and all human colonies as sovereign territory. Second, you will free any enslaved species within your empire who wish independence. Third, you will share your technological knowledge with us as reparations. The Vex delegates were visibly shocked. These terms are unprecedented. The collective does not surrender territory or resources. This isn't a negotiation, Wells stated flatly. We have the coordinates of your homeworld and every major world in your empire. We also have the access codes to your communication network. Accept our terms, or we will bring the war to you. This was partially a bluff. Humanity couldn't possibly wage an offensive war against the full might of the Vex Empire. But the recent battle had demonstrated that humans could inflict disproportionate damage through asymmetric warfare and adaptive tactics. After several hours of internal deliberation, the Vex returned with a counter-proposal. We will recognize human sovereignty and provide technological exchange. But the internal structure of the collective is not negotiable. Other species have accepted their place in our order. Kendrick nodded to Dr. Morgan, who activated a holographic display showing 17 different alien species. These are the races you've conquered. We've already begun broadcasting messages to them in their native languages, explaining how humans successfully resisted you. We've also transmitted schematics for the weapons we used against your fleet. The Vex emissary's skin paled to almost white. You would incite rebellion throughout the collective? We already have, Wells confirmed. The question is whether you want to face external war and internal rebellion simultaneously, or whether you're willing to evolve your own society. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Vex Collective faced an existential crisis. Their empire was built on the premise that resistance was futile and integration was inevitable. Humanity had shattered that premise in a single battle. After 2 more days of negotiations, the Vex reluctantly agreed to modified terms. Recognition of human sovereignty, technological exchange, and a referendum process for other species within the collective to determine their status. As the Vex delegation departed, Kendrick turned to Wells. They'll try to subvert the agreement. This isn't over. Wells nodded. Of course not. But we've bought time. Time to prepare, to expand, to build alliances with other species. The Vex aren't ready to accept that their way isn't the only way forward. And if they attack again, Morgan asked, then they'll learn that the first battle was just a small demonstration of what humanity is capable of when truly threatened. 6 months after the Treaty of Sol, humanity expanded its presence beyond the solar system. Colony ships established outposts in nearby star systems, while diplomatic envoys traveled to worlds within the Vex Collective where dissent was growing. Commander, Ellie Grant led the diplomatic mission to Thalassa, a water world whose amphibious inhabitants had been conquered by the Vex 3 centuries earlier. The Thalassians had been integrated into the collective as navigators and explorers, their natural affinity for 3-dimensional thinking making them valuable assets. Your arrival has sparked considerable debate among our people, said Moran, the Thalassian representative who met with Grant's team. His translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that the translation software interpreted as a mixture of hope and anxiety. Many fear the consequences of challenging the collective. We understand your caution, Grant replied. But the referendum process negotiated in the treaty gives you the legal right to determine your own future. Moran's skin flashed dark blue. Skepticism. The Vex have already begun pressuring our leadership. They claim humans are dangerous destabilizers who will abandon us once conflict begins. Grant had anticipated this. That's why we brought this. She activated a holographic display showing a new class of human warship in orbit around Thalassa. The UES Protector will remain in your system as a guarantee of our commitment. Any Vex aggression will be met with immediate response. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. Human diplomatic teams, always backed by military presence, encouraged subject species to assert their independence. Not all chose to break from the collective. Some had been integrated for millennia and knew no other way of life, but enough embraced the opportunity that a new interstellar faction began to form. On Earth, the Defense Council convened to assess the changing galactic landscape. Admiral Wells presented the latest intelligence. The Vex are in crisis, he reported. Their entire empire was built on the assumption that their system of specialized castes was the inevitable endpoint of evolution. Our existence challenges that assumption fundamentally. And they're responding by militarizing, General Rodriguez added. Our intelligence indicates they've diverted resources from 17 major engineering projects to warship construction. President Anna Chen, recently elected to lead Earth's unified government, studied the reports. Then war is coming despite our diplomatic efforts. Not necessarily, Dr. Morgan interjected. The Vex are pragmatic above all else. What we're seeing may be preparation for a worst-case scenario, not an immediate intention to attack. Wells nodded. There's another factor. We've confirmed that at least 3 other advanced civilizations exist beyond Vex territory. They've maintained their independence through careful isolation or technological superiority. And they're watching how this plays out, Chen concluded. Have we made contact? Indirectly, Morgan confirmed. We've detected quantified tachyon pulses matching patterns used by a species called the Meridians. They appear to be observing both human and Vex activities. Over the next few weeks, humanity formalized alliances with 6 former Vex subject species, creating what became known as the Coalition of the Free. Each brought unique capabilities. The Thalassians' navigational expertise, the Orvis's advanced biotechnology, the Kalindan manufacturing prowess. Most surprising was the defection of a Vex subspecies called the Architects, the engineering caste who had designed much of the collective's infrastructure. Philosophically aligned with humanity's creative approach to problem-solving, they brought invaluable knowledge of Vex technology and weaknesses. The collective's strength was always its specialization, explained Tarn, the architect leader who had escaped with a significant portion of his people. But specialization created dependency. Remove one caste, and the entire system becomes unstable. This insight became the foundation of coalition strategy. Rather than attempting to match the Vex in direct military power, they focused on disrupting the complex interdependencies of the collective's economic and supply systems. When the Vex finally moved against a coalition world, a resource-rich mining planet called Veritas, they found not just human defenders, but a combined force of 6 species, each contributing unique tactics and technologies. The battle ended in a decisive coalition victory. Vex forces, still struggling to adapt to human unpredictability, found themselves completely overwhelmed by the combined asymmetric tactics of multiple species fighting together. In the aftermath, President Chen addressed the coalition representatives gathered on Earth. Today marks a turning point. The Vex began this conflict believing in the superiority of their rigid hierarchical model. We've proven that diversity, adaptability, and cooperation create something far more powerful. As the coalition celebrated their victory on distant worlds, other ancient civilizations watched with growing interest. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was the catalyst. 1 year into the conflict, a new player entered the galactic stage. A massive vessel of unknown design appeared at the edge of coalition space, broadcasting on all frequencies in perfect replications of every coalition language. "We are the Meridians," the message stated. "We have observed your resistance against the Vex Collective with interest. We request dialogue." The Meridians, it transpired, were one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, a species that had achieved interstellar travel millennia, before the Vex began their conquests. Rather than expanding through colonization, they had chosen isolation and observation, studying the development of younger species from afar. Admiral Wells, now Supreme Commander of Coalition forces, led the delegation that met with the Meridian representatives aboard their enormous vessel. The aliens were tall, ethereal beings with translucent bodies that pulsed with internal light. "You have accomplished something unprecedented," the Meridian speaker told Wells. "In all our observations, no emerging species has successfully resisted Vex integration." "We had motivation," Wells replied dryly. "Survival is a powerful incentive." "It is more than survival," the speaker countered. "Many species survive within the collective. You demanded freedom, the right to determine your own destiny. This concept is disruptive to the galactic order." Dr. Morgan, now serving as Coalition Science Director, studied the Meridians with fascination. "You've been watching all this time. Why not intervene when the Vex began conquering other species?" The Meridians' light patterns shifted to a deep blue. "Non-interference has been our principle for 20,000 years. We believe that civilizations must follow their natural evolutionary path. The Vex model of specialized integration appeared to be the most efficient approach to galactic stability." "Efficient doesn't mean right," Wells argued. "And stability built on subjugation isn't true stability." The Meridian speaker's body flashed with complex patterns. "We are beginning to understand this perspective. Your coalition demonstrates an alternative model, diverse species cooperating while maintaining their distinct identities and autonomy." The meeting continued for hours, with the Meridians asking probing questions about human history, psychology, and social structures. They seemed particularly interested in humanity's rapid technological development and adaptive creativity. "Your species compressed developmental stages that took others millennia," the speaker noted. "From primitive tools to space travel in less than 10,000 years. From splitting the atom to interstellar travel in less than 2 centuries. This acceleration concerns many ancient civilizations, because they fear what we might become," Wells surmised. "Yes," the Meridian acknowledged. "Yet your coalition suggests a different path than conquest. We find this intriguing." When the meeting concluded, the Meridians offered neither alliance nor assistance, but neither did they oppose the coalition. Instead, they provided coordinates to several abandoned Meridian outposts containing technological archives, knowledge they described as appropriate for your current development stage. As the human delegation departed, the Meridian speaker delivered a final message. "We will be watching with great interest. The coming conflict will determine not just your fate, but potentially the direction of galactic civilization for the next epoch." Back on Earth, the coalition leadership debated the significance of the Meridian contact. "They're testing us," President Chen concluded. "Watching to see if we become conquerors ourselves once we acquire sufficient power." "And they're not the only ones watching," Wells added. "Intelligence suggests at least 2 other advanced civilizations are monitoring the situation." The technological windfall from the Meridian archives accelerated coalition development dramatically. Within months, human scientists, working alongside their alien counterparts, had adapted Meridian energy manipulation principles to create weapons capable of disabling Vex ships without destroying them. The timing was fortuitous. Vex forces had been regrouping, adapting their tactics and technologies to counter coalition strategies. Intelligence indicated they were preparing a massive offensive aimed at reclaiming breakaway worlds and striking directly at human colonies. "They've finally adapted," Wells told the Coalition Military Council. "The Vex we face now are not the same enemies we surprised in our first engagement. They've studied our tactics, modified their command structure, and incorporated unpredictability into their battle plans." The coalition prepared for what everyone recognized would be the decisive confrontation of the war. Every available ship was mobilized, every colony fortified. The architects provided critical intelligence on Vex fleet movements and vulnerabilities. When the Vex Armada arrived at the coalition defensive line, a carefully prepared position near the Tau Ceti system, they encountered not just military resistance but a completely new approach to warfare. Using Meridian-derived technology, coalition forces didn't simply destroy Vex ships. They disabled and captured them intact. Special operations teams, comprised of members from all coalition species, boarded the vessels and liberated the enslaved crews. "This isn't just about winning battles," Wells had explained in his pre-engagement address. "It's about showing there's another way forward. Every Vex crew member we free is potentially an ally in creating a new future." As the battle raged across the system, on distant worlds, the ancient civilizations continued their observation. The outcome would determine whether the galaxy's future belonged to rigid hierarchy or collaborative diversity. Humanity had never sought this role as catalyst for galactic change, but they embraced it with characteristic adaptability. The final battle lasted 7 days. 7 days of continuous combat across 12 star systems, involving thousands of ships and millions of beings from dozens of species. The Vex committed their entire reserve fleet to what their high command called the definitive engagement. What they hadn't anticipated was the extent of defection within their own ranks. Years of exposure to human unpredictability and coalition ideals had infected even the rigidly hierarchical Vex society. When the order came to launch a genocidal attack against human colonies, entire battle groups refused to comply. Admiral Wells, commanding the coalition forces from the flagship Defiant, watched in astonishment as nearly a third of the Vex fleet suddenly powered down their weapons. "They're broadcasting on an open channel," Lieutenant Davis reported. It's a declaration of independence. The worker and technician castes are refusing to fight." This was the moment the coalition had worked toward. Not just military victory, but the transformation of the conflict from within. The Vex Collective, built on absolute obedience to hierarchy, faced something they had no protocol for: revolution. The remaining loyal Vex ships fought with desperate ferocity, but caught between coalition forces and their own rebelling fleet, they were quickly overwhelmed. The Vex flagship, carrying the highest-ranking members of the command caste, attempted to retreat, but found its escape routes cut off by ships of its own fleet. When Wells finally boarded the captured Vex command vessel, he found its leaders in disarray. The Vex Supreme Commander, a tall, spindly being with elaborate cranial crests, seemed physically unable to comprehend the situation. "This is not possible," the commander insisted through the translation device. "The collective has existed for 12,000 years. Our system is perfect. Each species serves its ordained function. Your system worked until it encountered something it couldn't classify," Wells replied. "Humans don't fit neatly into your categories. We're not specialists, we're generalists. We adapt. And now, you're going to have to adapt too." The peace negotiations that followed weren't just between humans and Vex. Representatives from all coalition species participated, as did delegates from the rebelling Vex castes. The Meridian sent observers, and for the first time in recorded history, 2 other ancient civilizations, the crystalline Axiom and the gas-based Nimbians, sent representatives as well. "What we're witnessing," Dr. Morgan observed to Wells, during a break in the proceedings, "is nothing less than the restructuring of galactic society. The Vex model of specialized integration is giving way to something new: collaborative diversity. The galactic concordat that emerged from the negotiations established a new interstellar order. The Vex Collective was dissolved, replaced by a galactic council, where all species, regardless of technological development or military power, had equal representation. Former Vex subject species could choose independence or continued association with their former masters, but as equals, not subordinates. Most revolutionary was the principle of evolutionary self-determination. Every sentient species had the right to develop according to its own path, free from external control or enforced integration. 1 year after the signing of the Concordat, humanity celebrated the opening of the Galactic Embassy on Earth. Representatives from 32 species gathered in the Great Hall of the newly constructed building, with holographic connections to another 40 worlds. President Chen addressed the assembled delegates. 3 years ago, humanity was alone, facing extinction at the hands of a vastly superior force. Today, we stand at the center of a new galactic community. We never sought this role, but we accept the responsibility it brings. Ambassador Kendrick, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, reflected on the journey as he watched the various alien delegates interact. The formerly rigid Vex mingling with their former subjects. The ancient Meridians, engaging in animated discussion with human scientists. Even the reclusive Axiom, who had hidden from the galaxy for millennia, were cautiously forming relationships. "We changed them," Kendrick remarked to Admiral Wells, who stood beside him in full dress uniform. "But they've changed us too." Wells nodded thoughtfully. "We went from a species that had barely reached our own moon to a founding member of a galactic community in less than a generation. We've compressed social evolution just as we compressed technological development. Dr. Morgan joined them, accompanied by Tarn, the architect leader who had become one of humanity's closest allies. The Meridians have a theory about that, she said. They believe certain species serve as catalysts, evolutionary accelerators, that drive change throughout entire ecosystems. On Earth, it was humans. In the galaxy, it's turning out to be humanity. Tarn's mechanical eyes adjusted as he surveyed the hall. The Vex spent 12,000 years believing that specialization and hierarchy were the inevitable endpoint of evolution. You showed us that adaptability, creativity, and cooperation are equally valid paths, perhaps even more successful ones. As the ceremony concluded, the assembled delegates raised their voices, or equivalent communicative appendages, in the first galactic anthem, a piece composed collaboratively by artists from 20 different worlds. Beyond the embassy, on screens across Earth, and transmitted to colonies throughout human space, billions watched this moment of transformation. Children who had been born during the war would grow up in a galaxy vastly different from the one their parents had known, a galaxy where humanity was not alone, not afraid, and no longer fighting merely to survive. The war had come to humanity uninvited, but in rising to meet it, humans had changed the course of galactic history. The Vex had believed their empire wasn't ready for war. They had been right, but not in the way they imagined. The war wasn't ready for humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same.